Now, Ask Dr. Love with psychotherapist, author, love and relationship expert Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. For expert advice on love and relationships, call into the show at 888-463-6748. That's 888-GO-FOR-IT. Or you can submit your question online at AskDrLove.com. Now, here's Dr. Love.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ask Dr. Love Radio. It's my pleasure to be with you again today. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt like your tongue is your own worst enemy? Well, if you said yes, you're not alone. By now, you've probably heard about Paula Dean's recent foot-in-mouth incident. Well, you know, Paula, like millions of people, is suffering from what I call emotional foot-in-mouth disease. So could you have the same problem? Well, answer this question. Is your relationship hanging in the balance because of what you have said in the heat of a moment? Or has your mouth actually been the cause of your losing a relationship? And if you play back a transcript of what you said or done, does it make you cringe? Well, if you said yes, you could be suffering from emotional foot-in-mouth disease. So today I'm going to talk about how you can develop the skill of keeping a civil tongue in your mouth, even when you feel like biting someone's head off. So stick with me as I share with you my proven techniques for controlling your temper and your tongue. And of course, later in the show, I'm going to answer 3 questions that came into the site. The first one's called High Hopes. And here I'm working with a woman who loves a man who just got out of an abusive relationship in which his ex scalded him with boiling water. Meanwhile, Ms. High Hopes is always there for him, ready to service him sexually whenever his need arises. Meanwhile, he refuses her every request and says that he doesn't want a relationship with her because he knows that he's going to do her harm, as if he isn't already. So the only question she has for me is whether he loves her. So stick around to find out what's wrong with this picture. And the first clue is the fact that she wants this kind of guy's love. The second question I'm going to answer is, in 6,000 miles away, but I want him back. And here, helping a woman from South Korea whose boyfriend made a request to have sex with another woman during their absence. She went ballistic, acted on her anger, and he went bye-bye. And now she wants to know if there's any way to resurrect this relationship despite the distance and despite the fact that he's been seeing someone else now. So stick around to hear my recommendations for what long-distance couples can do to make their sex life not become an ex-life, and what she can do to lay the groundwork for him coming back to her when his studies are over. And then the third question that I'm going to answer is called Insecure Girl Who's Called Up the Wedding but Now Wants to Go Back. And in this question, I'm helping a woman who realizes that she acted on her fear of being dumped by dumping her fiancé. And now she wants to know if there's any way to win him back. So stay with me as you hear my step-by-step explanation for what she needs to do to heal her own impulsivity and what she needs to tell him in order to create the confidence in him to try with her again. All right, and of course we're going to have a reading between the sheets segment, right? What relationship is complete without sex? So this question's called Smitten, and I'm helping out a man who loves his wife but has a crush on another woman. And he wants to know if there's anything wrong with having a crush. He calls it an innocent crush. So I want you to stick around as you hear me crush his delusions regarding what he believes is an innocent crush. All right, so let's get on to emotional hoof-in-mouth disease. So let's say you have a friend, you have a family member or a kid who's really miffed you to the max. What do? Well, if you're like most people, you let your tongue rip and you say every unedited thought that enters your brain. And guess what happens next? You offend the other person. That other person pays you back in spades. Now the war is on and the relationship is also on the skids. So as I've been saying for a long time, whatever you say and do boomerangs back on you. And so while it may feel good to get your rocks off in the moment, on the rocks is where your relationship is going to end up if you don't mind your mouth. Mind your mouth or your relationships and your life will go south, as Paula Dean has shown. Now the key here is to develop a skill that's known in the shrink world as impulse control. Now, most relationships fall apart because people act out their anger in various dysfunctional ways, like using hostile words, sarcasm, threats, yelling, name-calling, verbal bashing, character assassination, or hostile behavior, slamming doors, pushing, shoving, etc. In my book, Till Death Do Us Part, Unless I Kill You First, I call these fight traps. Now, I want you to know there is a sick kind of satisfaction that we humans get when we dump anger on somebody else, especially a loved one who is really hurt or pissed us off. Now, why is letting your tongue rip such a dangerous thing? Well, emotional venting has a negative effect on the person who is being dumped on, and the dumpee stores up resentment and pays you back in spades. So whatever you say or do in the heat of the moment is going to bite you in the butt later on, because if you hurt your partner, you are ultimately hurting yourself. It's going to come back to haunt you. So if outright venting and subtle paybacks aren't your answer, then what can you do with all the anger? Because you don't want to stuff it either and get depressed or anxious or physical symptoms. So now I'm going to really throw you a curveball. And whenever I say this, people say to me, what are you talking about? I am going to tell you what I tell all my patients is you are not supposed to express your angry feelings. Now, I know this is what most marriage counseling and therapists tell you, but in fact, it actually invites you to take turns dumping on each other. When you express, you vent, you rant, you rage. And what I'm telling you to do is the exact opposite. You're never again to deliver raw, angry emotions in pure, unedited form to your partner or anyone else. And don't believe that you can't help yourself, because we both know that you can control yourself when it comes to your boss or your superior. You don't tell your boss what a loser he is, and you know you'd lose your job if you did. So you can choose to control yourself when you want to. And you need to tell yourself that you must control yourself, especially when it comes to your partner, your friends, your family member. And if you don't control yourself at home, you won't lose your job. You're just going to lose your relationship. So the point is, you have to only say what you know is going to be helpful, beneficial, and constructive to your partner and the relationship. And this is synonymous with being helpful and constructive to yourself, since, as I always say, everything you say and do boomerangs back on you. So I like to use the image of a sieve when we're talking about angry emotions. And I'm going to show you how to filter your raw emotions through this imaginary sieve of your intellect. And what passes through the sieve is going to be transformed and detoxified so that it's fit for human consumption. So do this, and you're automatically going to actually help the entire human race evolve, because your relationship becomes a pebble in the universal pond. How you behave in your relationship becomes a model for your kids, for other people, a model of how we're all supposed to behave, especially when we're angry. And think of how the world would be if everyone followed this principle. Now, when it comes to knowing how your words are going to land with another person, you need to develop a skill that I call partial identification. Now, this fancy term means being able to put yourself on another person's emotional side of the fence. Now, I'm not talking about total merger in which you lose yourself entirely. Instead, I'm talking about cultivating the skill of being able to keep your feet firmly planted on the ground while at the same time being able to put yourself in another person's shoes so that you know ahead of time what the other person is going to feel when you say or do X, Y, or Z. So like all skills, this one improves with practice. So if you practice partial identification during moments of calm, the skill is going to be firmly under your psychological belt when you need it most, when you're angry. But make no mistake, no matter how much you've practiced, when trouble hits, you're going to find it very difficult to partially identify. Now, however difficult it may be when you're confronted by your partner or anyone else who angers you, you have to temporarily put in parentheses your own ideas, your opinions, your emotions, and make space in your mind and heart for the other person. And if you succeed, your partial identification is going to express itself in sentences like, "Oh, I see what you mean," or, "Yeah, I can understand that you felt X, Y, or Z when I said this or I did that." Now, for the process to be successful, you've got to resist the temptation to defend yourself. You have to be willing to accept responsibility for the fact that your behavior or your words have created discomfort, pain, hurt, or anger in your partner or other person. Now, in order to understand what your partner feels and for you to take responsibility for your part in creating that pain, you have to be sufficiently secure of your worth, and you have to have a solid self-esteem. So to help yourself accept your relational shortcomings, another condition has to be met. You have to realize that it's not possible for your partner to accept and identify with globally negative statements. And that's why global accusations, insults, and name-calling, those fight traps I talk about, are the enemies of relationship happiness. So, for example, you did it again. You'll always be the same bastard or the same bitch. You never show me love and respect are all difficult to accept because of their global accusatory nature. Expecting your attacked other party to identify with these across-the-board condemnations is the same as requesting that person to commit psychological suicide. You know, the attacked partner might respond by saying sarcastic self-deprecations under the pretext of identifying with the angry mate. Yeah, you're right. I'm an abominable husband or wife. I understand I'm a beast, stupid, an SOB. But when these kinds of sarcastic answers are made to an accusing partner, they aren't sincere and they don't express any form of identification, because who in his right mind could identify with such statements about himself? So in order for the confronted partner to partially identify with his or her mate's statements or feelings, the confrontation has to be limited to a specific aspect of that person's behavior. For example, a statement like, when you used the word X, Y, or Z, I felt hurt. That's an acceptable confrontation that permits the confronted party, through further questioning, to understand the feelings that his or her behavior created. So, in essence, I'm saying it's the responsibility of the confronting partner or person to construct a precise and focused description of the problem and to present it coolly. But in doing this, the person on the receiving end is going to find it easier to partially identify with what's being said. And you also need to realize that during a successful conflict discussion, partial identification is practiced by both partners. So the confronting partner has two tasks, as the confronter has to speak in a way that the other person can tolerate, and also has to be able to partially identify with the other person's reactions to the confrontation. And the confronted partner has to really partially identify with the feelings that his or her mate presents. So as you can see, both parties need to partially identify with each other. Now, how can you learn to partially identify with another person? Well, you have to open your heart to each other and tap into your feelings of love. And I can't stress this point enough. Love is the key that unlocks your heart and permits you to partially identify with other people. Now, how can you access feelings of love when you're pissed off? Now, a good way to do this is to recall a special moment you shared together, a rare period of total identification that I spoke of before. So recall a particularly excellent sexual encounter, or recall one of your partner's qualities that you especially love. Do whatever you need to work that works for you. Now, I want to give you just two quick little exercises to practice this partial identification, which is really going to take you miles in improving your relationship. The first exercise is, in addition to accessing your feelings of love, another way to perfect your partial identification skills is to temporarily switch roles. So select an area of conflict and play your mate's position, and vice versa. And make sure to play your roles believably. Feel the way you know your mate feels. Right? And then even state your mate's position. And if you played your part well, you're going to have an easier time empathizing with your mate's emotions. And if you make the effort to mentally switch roles when conflicts arise in the future, you're going to be taking a giant step toward resolution and helping yourself not exhibit that hoof-and-mouth disease. Now, here's the second exercise. Sometimes it's difficult to partially identify because you're having a hard time relating to why your mate feels the way he or she does. So to get around this, forget the situation that triggered your partner's feeling, and instead recall an instance in which you felt the way your partner feels. Now, once you have that feeling in mind, you can more easily understand your partner, even if you can't relate to the specific event that triggered your partner's emotions. Now, remember, you can choose to cure yourself from emotional hoof-and-mouth disease. You don't have to follow in Paula's footsteps. And yes, say no to racial bashing like the kind that's occurring around the discussions of the immigration bill, or any kinds of bashing that we fall into when other people don't share our values, think the way we think, feel the way we feel. Now, I'm going to return in a moment, and when I do, I'm going to share with you my 5-step method for speaking in a kinder and gentler way. Be back with you in a moment on Ask Dr. Love Radio.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. To speak to Dr. Turndorf live on the air, call 888-463-6748. AskDrLove.com is the web's premier relationship advice site since 1996. Visit AskDrLove.com to search thousands of free relationship advice articles on any relationship issue you may have. Or you can submit a question to her free advice column. However, if you're listening live, why not call in? Don't be shy. Dr. Turndorf wants to help you, and this is a unique chance to get a personal answer from one of today's most respected experts. So, if you have a question for her, please call in now at 888-463-6748. That's 888-463-6748. Now back to Ask Dr. Love with Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. Once again, here's Dr. Love.
Hello again, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Love Radio. This is the time in the show I call Dr. Love's Quickie because it's a short segment, so we better get right to it. So I was talking before I left about the 5 ways to cure your emotional hoof-and-mouth disease. But before I tell you those, let me just say a little bit about the fight traps. I talk about them all the time until death do us part, all over my archives, everywhere. Because, you know, the way we learn how to behave, especially when we're angry, is by watching our parents and how they acted during our deformative years. And one category of fight traps I call open warfare. These are those outright insults that we all lay on each other when we're mad. And character assassination, name calling, put downs. This is emotional hoof-and-mouth disease. So many people fall into this trap. Let me give you an example of what a character assassination looks like, or emotional hoof-and-mouth disease in action. Steve, he says, "You know you're a real loser, Louise. You should talk. You're lazy as hell," she says. And Steve says, "I'm not the gutless one who won't dare ask for a raise." You get it, right? That is putting someone down. Verbal attacking, another open warfare. It leads obviously to defensive responses and verbal counterattack. So here's an example. Marie is standing in the laundry room. The blue vein at her temple is beating faster than a rap tune. And then her partner Josh enters the room and she hurls a wet towel on his head and says, "You seem to be clueless to the fact that laundry needs to be done each week." And he says, "Oh, like I do nothing around the house," defensive, and "not that you would notice," counterattack. And then he shouts, peeling the towel from his head. So we know how when we act on anger and we engage in emotional hoof-and-mouth disease, how our relationships go south. So what can you do to not fall into this trap? How do you cure yourself of emotional hoof-and-mouth disease? So you can train yourself to speak in a kinder, gentler way. And here are my 5 tips for doing this. And they work. But this is a practice deal. You've got to practice, make the commitment to change, and then practice. So your step 1 is recognize your own warning signs before you shoot off your mouth. There are always feelings that we have in our body, physical sensations that are a warning before we're about to blow off our mouths. We might feel tight in the stomach, knot in our chest. You recognize your signs, and you will see as you become more aware of what the symptom is, you can catch yourself before you shoot your mouth off. Now, step 2 is hold your horses and your tongue. So once you recognize the sign, you make a conscious decision to hold your horses, not say or do anything. And then step 3 is you take 5. Leave the room. Go splash water on your face. If you can go into action and insult somebody verbally and shoot your mouth off, you can also go into action and walk the other way. Now, when you walk the other way, step 4 is evaluate why you're getting so hot. Why? Because usually we're getting hot because some old scar from childhood has been triggered. That's always what gets us really, really hot. So, of course, it may be that you have an ongoing issue with your partner and that it's happening again, and that triggers you as well. But even those ongoing issues themselves are smoke screens for earlier old scars. I talk all about that until death do us part. Show you how to unveil the old scar and heal that, and then your current day fights stop. And step 5, when you do come back, choose your words consciously, vowing to only say or do what you know is going to be beneficial not only to you, but your partner and the relationship at large. All right? Those are 5 simple steps. They sound easy, but now it's up to you to practice the discipline. Now, I also want you to know that being aware of what you're feeling from moment to moment is going to help you a lot. Because if you don't do this check-in with yourself, your feelings can easily get brushed under your emotional rug. And then that turns you into a ticking time bomb that can explode in any moment. And instead of being in charge, you become a loose cannon on deck that fires off verbal ammunition without warning. Now, keep in mind that this lack of awareness starts when you were a kid because you learn to swallow your feelings of anger to avoid your parents' anger or punishments. But then as you bury your feelings, you develop unconscious defense mechanisms that help you keep your unwanted feelings, especially your angry feelings, under wraps. Now, obviously, really common defenses against anger are avoidance and denial, and then we get depression, anxiety, panic attacks, physical ailments, ulcers, headache, colitis, you know the whole deal. But now displacement is yet another defense that we develop to handle our anger. And with displacement, we're temporarily burying our anger, which we later dump or displace onto someone else. So if you're angry with the boss, you come home and you kick the dog. Now, in the case of Paula Dean, I'm betting that her hostile comment and her anti-racial remark was a way of displacing anger, perhaps built up anger from another unrelated source. And in fact, racism itself is a form of displacement in which a person misdirects his or her anger onto an entire group of people. All right, let me give you a couple of tweets and then I'll take a break. If you keep taking verbal poops on your partner's head, your relationship's going to end up dead. And only say and do what you know is going to be helpful to you and your partner. Letting your mouth rip is a very unhealthy form of ego trip. And while it may feel good to get your rocks off in the moment, on the rocks is where your relationship in your life is going to end up. And remember, whatever you say or do boomerangs back on you, so mind your mouth or your relationships will go south. And if your tongue is more like a loaded weapon, your partner may make a permanent defection. And last but not least, lips are made for kissing, not dissing. I'll be back with you in a moment on Ask Dr. Love Radio.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. To speak to Dr. Turndorf live on the air, call 888-463-6748. That's 888-463-6748. If you like what you're hearing, you can learn about Dr. Turndorf's techniques for turning conflict into connection and healing in her critically acclaimed, groundbreaking book, Till Death Do Us Part, Unless I Kill You First, a step-by-step guide for resolving relationship conflict. Find out more about this book and read a free excerpt by visiting AskDrLove.com. This is Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. And if you have a question for her, please call in now at 888-463-6748. This show is for you, the listeners, so please give her a call now. You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. Once again, here's Dr. Love.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Love Radio. I'm Dr. Jamie Turndorf, and this is the time in the show where I answer your questions. So the first one that I'm going to answer is called High Hopes. Hi, Dr. Love. I won't say I'm in a relationship with this guy because he didn't propose to me. He's my ex. He's 32 and I'm 30, and he was in a relationship which ended around August 2012. We suddenly met and we shared our history whereby we decided to be friends until one day he told me if he sees me with another guy, he would get cross. So there was a day that this guy was poured by a boiling water by his girlfriend while at work, and I received a call from him that he was being admitted. And while I was arranging to go and see him, he was discharged. And later, he was arrested and so on. And I've been through thick and thin with him. And what's worse, I even buy gifts for him, phone to find out if he's okay. And when we do have sex, it's whenever he needs it. But on my case, whenever I need him, he's busy, he's tired, he needs time alone. And I asked him if we could try our relationship, and he told me it won't work because he's busy and he won't have time for me, and he's scared and he's going to hurt me. But he's already doing it now because he sleeps with me whenever he feels like, and he's getting away with it. And when I try to sit down and ask him to discuss the matter, whether he's in love with me or not, he gets cross, and and keeps quiet. And last week he compared me to his ex, but I asked him to be specific on which mistake I did. But I remember one day he called me and I asked him to come to my place, and he says I mustn't push him like the previous relationship. And he says he doesn't want to be controlled, and I'm lost, and I really love this guy. He's single and I'm single. Please help me. I thought I should be patient until he gets healed, but there is no communication between us. That's the problem. And whenever he sees his ex-girlfriend, he gets annoyed and gets angry at everybody. We enjoy our company so much, but after having sex some weeks, if I call and ask for more, he says that we have to stop and we're doing it because it'll hurt me one day and it would be painful to him to see me hurting. Does he love? Okay, wait a second here. This thing, I got to straighten you out on this deal. Whether he loves you or not is hardly the issue. All right, let me go over the main points of where your problem lies. The man you love's girlfriend scalded him with boiling water. And then after being released from the hospital, he was arrested. So I assume it's because he paid her back. You're always there for him. He doesn't reciprocate. And what he does say is that when you make a request, you're like his ex and that you should stop pushing him. Okay. He also told you straight out that he knows he would abuse you if you were to make your relationship official. But you think you should be patient until he's healed. Now, guess what? It's you who needs to be healed. You're not connecting the dots here because you are literally begging to be abused. You're only concerned with winning an abusive man's love. What is wrong with this picture? Girl, you are in grave danger. And the fact that you don't see the danger is even more scary because it's your own emotional injury that's luring you into this trap of trying to win this man's love. Now, you are in a repetition compulsion. It's caused by childhood trauma, what I call the old scars we suffer as kids. So if you read my book, Till Death Do Us Part, Unless I Kill You First, you're going to find out all about old scars, what causes them, and how to break free. But in a nutshell, let me give you the deal here. As kids, we're all narcissistic by nature, and this means that we're the center of the universe. And as the center of the universe, we figure everything that happens to us is because of us. So if we're neglected or abused by our parents, we figure that the abuse is our own fault. We were bad. We weren't lovable. Now, on top of all this, kids are born with a sense of omnipotence, meaning we think we're all powerful. So as kids, we think we have the power to fix our parents. So if only we tried hard, boys or girls, our parents would love us. So when we don't succeed in fixing our parents, which we never can since nobody can fix another person, we just take our unfinished business into adulthood. And what we do next is choose a partner who emotionally resembles the parent who harmed us. I call this setting the stage. So next we set out to replay our original drama from childhood. So we do this with our adult partner, hoping that this time around we're going to succeed with our partner the way we didn't succeed with our parent. And if we succeed in winning our partner's love, we're going to feel as though we actually won our parents' love. And lo and behold, our old scar is going to feel healed, and we'll have achieved what we call our happy ending. And it sounds good, but it really rarely works this way because we have chosen a partner who is damaged and limited in the exact same way that our parent was. So this means that you're never going to succeed in getting the emotional goodies that you always needed and deserved. But here's where the repetition comes in. We just can't seem to stop trying to get blood from a stone, because to give up and let go of a partner who isn't meeting our needs feels like giving up any chance of healing our old scar. So we stay in the ring and we keep being re-injured. And rather than healing our old scar, we just drive the scar deeper and deeper into our psyches. Here's where you are. And as you can see, you, like most people who haven't had therapy, are still holding on to both the narcissism and the omnipotent fantasies of your youth. You keep thinking that you have the power to make him love you. And you keep on thinking that it's his not loving you that has something to do with you, which is why you keep asking him what you're doing wrong. Well, you aren't doing anything wrong. The time and attention that you expect from him is normal too. The problem is that you're so locked in the repetition that you don't see that this guy doesn't have it to give you or any woman. He's hateful and withholding. He made his ex so burning mad that she burned him with water. The point here is you need to heal, not him. And to do this healing, you've got to read my book, Till Death Do Us Part, Unless I Kill You First. And it's going to show you how to identify your old scar and what to do to heal it. And you need to emotionally feed yourself the love you never received as a kid. And don't put your poor, abused, and empty inner child in the hands of strangers or abusers. This man is not your parent. He's not invested in giving you the love you didn't receive as a child. He's telling you that his agenda is abuse, and he's trying in his way to protect you from his own evilness that results from his own injury. Now, I want you to read my book and put my healing steps into practice, and surround yourself with warm, loving people who can give you the love you deserve. And you'll know you're healed when you don't care whether he loves you or not, and when you want nothing to do with him or any man like him. All right? Now, the other thing I also want to say about this question is when you get caught in a repetition compulsion and you're so desperate to try to win that parent's love through the partner who's abusing you or depriving you, you lose all sense of self-respect. You start begging and pleading and giving gifts and giving sex to someone who doesn't give it back to you when you want it. And besides the fact that this is, symptomatic of your own old scar, it makes the other person lose all respect for you. It is unappealing. We don't want partners who seem desperate, hungry, or needy. It's part of the natural mate selection process. This is based in our biological programming. We want partners who are desirable and top drawer because that in our mind says we're going to produce good offspring with this person. Well, if the person is desperate and hungry and begging and pleading, it says, oh, you're not worthwhile, especially a woman. If a woman is begging and pleading, that's a total reversal of the natural order of things where men are supposed to fight to win a woman away from her various suitors. Well, if she starts begging and pleading and chasing, she says, I'm not very worthwhile. Nobody wants me. So that just drives somebody even farther away. All right. Now, here's my next question. This one's 6,000 miles away, but I want him back. Dear Dr. Love, my boyfriend and I broke up from a long-distance relationship less than 2 months ago, and we met in South Korea and had an intense story for 4 months, and after that he moved in New Zealand to continue his studies. And I can't say we were perfect because we faced problems due to my impulsive character and his mystery family story. He does not have a relationship with them, but I have to admit I love him, and we continue our relationship on Skype for 4 months. And lately we felt very good about our relationship, and we started to share a lot of intimacy, and it helped us in our communication and in our bonding. And then one day he asked me, would it be bad if he had sex with someone else? And he would be happy with whatever I decide, and he didn't want to have another relationship rather than me. And I couldn't control my feelings. I got so angry, and we fought a lot after that. But we overcame that situation, as he promised he wouldn't do that, and right after he asked me to plan our future together somewhere in the world. Anyway, when I wanted to talk, he would say that he had no time and a lot of studies to do or had to sleep, and I was mad at him, and we got into a really big fight. And the next day he broke up with me by texting and saying that it's better to see other people for a couple of months, and he couldn't study with all my pushy behavior, and he repeated discussions that I used to bring up, and I couldn't let him go. So I wrote many times begging him to come back and insisting over and over. I know I made a mistake. But the hardest time was when I wrote him again last week, and he said that he was seeing another girl, and that crushed me. He wrote me that we can't have a relationship now, and I just keep thinking of that now, and I dream of having him again. So can I get him back while we're still 6,000 miles away? And you signed this to me with love from South Korea. Well, dear Lovey from South Korea, I'm really sorry to hear what you've been through. And long-distance relationships are really, really tough, as you have discovered. Now, I understand that when he asked if he could have sex with someone else, you freaked. I do get that. Now, here's what happened. You felt hurt and you panicked that he was going to find another woman, develop another relationship, and leave you. So you acted on your feelings by raging and clutching at him. And in the end, your worst fear came true. And this is what always happens. When we act on our feelings and our fear, rather than talk our feelings out, the feelings end up coming back to haunt us in spades. So in the future, you've got to remember to talk, not act out. And doing so would have resulted in a very different outcome because he was telling you that he was sexually frustrated. And at the same time, he was also saying he didn't want another relationship. Now, had you talked, you would have come up with a creative way of satisfying his sexual needs. And with dealing with long-distance relationships, I always say, when you're feeling randy, here's where technology comes in handy. Had you talked, you would have found a way to make love via Skype. And this is water under the bridge. Where can you go from here now? So all you can do is write to him and share your heart. Tell him the truth that you love him deeply and you were crushed when he brought up the topic of having sex with someone else. Admit that you were afraid to lose him. Own the fact that you didn't talk about your feelings and instead acted on them and pushed him away. And tell him that you wish that you had found a way to make love with him long distance. And then tell him that you wish him well and then let go. And if you show this level of self-awareness and maturity, and this person that he's seeing now is just a temporary sexual partner, there's a good chance you will hear from him again. And I really hope you do. And please, please do let me know, because I really, really am rooting for you. You sound like a doll. You know, the funny thing is, you know, that old saying, if you set the bird free, it will come back to you. That's the same thing in your case, because when you push and push and push on someone, a person naturally resists all the more. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuit order, always said, you want to enter through the other person's door and have him or her leave through yours. The point is, you don't try to twist the other person's arm, change the other person's way of seeing things or thinking or feeling. So by you saying to him where you were coming from, acknowledging your error, telling him how much you love him, regretting that you didn't help him find a way to have sex with you, and then letting him go. Don't try to force him to come back to you. You're giving yourself every shot of getting him back. All right. Promise you'll let me know what happens. When I come back, we're going to talk about that insecure girl who called up the wedding and now wants her fiancé back. Be back with you in a moment on Ask Dr. Love Radio.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. To speak to Dr. Turndorf live on the air, call 888-463-6748. That's 888-463-6748. If you've recently been through a breakup and are looking for a second chance, wondering how you can reconcile with your ex, or if it's even possible after all you've been through, Dr. Turndorf's latest book, Make Up, Don't Break Up, presents her 5-step plan for reconciling with your ex. This plan was developed out of years of research, working with thousands of couples at her Center for Emotional Communication. This is a proven no-hype and no-nonsense method that gets right to the root of the problem to guide you to the right path towards reigniting a lasting relationship. For more about Make Up, Don't Break Up, visit AskDrLove.com. You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. Once again, here's Dr. Love.
Hello again, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Love Radio. I'm Dr. Jamie Turndorf, and I'm always so happy to be with you each week on my show. So listen up. I got a question for you that's quite the doozy. This one's the story of the woman who broke off the engagement and now wants her guy back. Dear Dr. Love, I've read some articles of yours and realized that my fear of abandonment and my insecurities, trust issues, and jealousy stem from my being abused and not because of my parents having abandoned me. I come from a terribly abusive family, and I am verbally and physically abusive toward my now ex-fiancé, who I want back. I called off the wedding, I realize now, because I was afraid of being dumped. And of course he did some things that gave me valid reasons to be suspicious, but I've confronted him and he has repeatedly said that he's not lying about adding the ladies on his social media sites. And I believe him. And he's told me before that he will not tolerate my abusive behavior. And I hear what he says as I'm going to leave you. And I've tried hard to control my anger and frustrations, and I am trying to be nice, but I feel that this is not something I can fix overnight. My whole family talks to one another in rude, crude ways. However, I'm lucky to have found a man who has given me so much love and support. My friends don't know the depth of my problems, and therefore have strongly advised me not to return to his arms. But I know the problem lies in me. Anyhow, I got very upset at him, and I have been upset with him for not being patient with me as I try to fix my problem. In the last few months, he started to withdraw because I had a massive blow-up that truly traumatized him. He stuck with me, but since then I've noticed he's changed. His withdrawal led me to not love him as much because I was afraid of getting hurt. And I took his fear of me as being ashamed of me, embarrassed by me, and as a sign that he's about to leave me before our wedding. So I broke it off. Dr. Love, what should I do now? Wow. So first I want to say how much I admire your courage and your honesty, because you already made the most important step toward healing by owning your problem to me. And I commend you for your strength of character, because most people who behave abusively refuse to admit it. And I understand that you were afraid that your boyfriend was going to drop you. And you pulled a preemptive strike and broke off the relationship before he could dump you. And it sounds like your boyfriend is much healthier than your family. And the fact that you attracted a man like him says that you are already light years beyond your family. And at this point, you have two issues. First, you have to resolve the abusive behavior within yourself, and second, you have to see whether you can save the relationship. And they are connected, because I believe that if your boyfriend knows that you are truly committed to solving the problem, he's going to feel safer about trying again with you. Now, if you want him back, tell him what you told me, namely that you know you have a problem and that you are committed to resolving it. Now, in terms of how to stop the abusive behavior, till death do us part unless I kill you first, is just what the doctor ordered for you. Believe me when I tell you, because it's going to show you, my book's going to show you exactly how to stop acting out. Now, you can download the book immediately right from my site or get a hard copy from Amazon. Now, one of the things you're going to learn is that adult relationships constantly trigger feelings from childhood because the unconscious mind compares present-day events with childhood experiences. And this is what I call the emotional lake effect. Now, this is like the actual lake effect, where a storm gains in intensity as it draws moisture from the Great Lakes. Well, likewise, your mind is unconsciously associating present-day events with the wounds you suffered when you were a kid. We all do this. And then we experience disproportionately huge reactions to the current events because you are literally churning up all the feelings from the old abuses. They are coming out without us knowing it, and we're overreacting. And that's also why the feeling is hard to shake, because the earlier wound has been reactivated and we don't know it. We're just feeling a mountain of feelings. Our brains do this because they're trying to help us heal and work through our old feelings. So making the link between then and now and working through the old feelings is going to help you heal the old wound. And it also helps you to cool down when you make the link. And Till Death Do Us Part is going to show you also how to turn your raw anger into productive communications that are going to bring you closer to your guy rather than pull you apart. Now, I also want you to know that abusive behavior is caused by impulse disorders, which means that you have trouble controlling your angry impulses. Now, I want to teach you a technique that's going to help you develop impulse control so that when you feel a rage impulse, you're going to be able to control your words and actions. So, when you're angry, at this point, you have a zero fuse. You go from stimuli, whatever was said or done to tick you off, to explosion without any delay. And what we want to do is develop a longer and longer fuse so that you can separate the stimuli from the explosion. So to do this, you need to recognize what we call the premonitory sensations that you feel in your body before you blow. Do you feel a tightness in your chest or your stomach? Do your muscles get tense throughout your body? Do you feel like your brains are going to explode? Now, identify it. And then the next time you feel the sensation, stop and say, warning, rage is coming up. And then instead of saying or doing anything abusive, take another action. Distance yourself, go to the John, splash water on your face, take a walk, like I said before. The operation of controlling your actions is going to help you develop a longer fuse. And this technique is similar to lifting weights. At first, you're going to be weak, but in time, you're going to develop the ability to resist more and more emotional weight. And you do what I describe, and you're going to be teaching your psychic muscles to bear the weight of your feelings. And soon, you're going to be able to stop acting them out. And when you take distance, ask yourself what the current event reminds you of from your childhood. Make that link. and then separate what's happening now with your boyfriend from what happened then. What's different now? How is he different? And then when you're calm, use my XY formula, which is your substitute for abusive behavior. And I fully outline the XY formula where you're going to say what was said or done and how you feel about it and what you prefer. And I outline this fully in the book. But you want to stay very cool, describing how you feel, not venting or expressing. And you're also going to find it helpful to tell your boyfriend how the current event reminds you of the past. And doing so is going to help him to realize that your reaction is not all about him. It's going to help him feel less threatened, and it's going to help him be more supportive of you. It's going to help you also use the relationship to heal your old scars with his help. But your job is to speak to him calmly. No attacks, no raised voices. Speak to him in a way that's going to make him want to listen and understand you. And his job is to do just that. And I would like him to also read the book, too, so that he learns how to properly respond to you. And if he doesn't listen and understand, and if he defends and justifies himself, that's going to only upset you, and we'll be back to where we started. Now, I also want you to pay attention to the fact that anger and the abusive behavior that results from it is really a symptom of other deeper feelings. So when you're angry, you're really hurt. When you're hurt, it's because you had a need that wasn't met. So I want you to begin to pay attention to yourself and identify your needs, starting with what you need in the moment that to feel more fulfilled. And so you won't be feeling so hurt and angry. So I've given you the whole blueprint now for how to get your ship back on course. All right, let me know how you do. All righty. So now guess what? Do you feel like entering into the bedroom, or are you just tired, man? You just want to lie around on a hammock? Well, let's hit the sheets. This one's called Smitten. Dear Dr. Love, I've been married for 3 years, and I'm very much in love with my wife. But recently I met a woman at work who I was quite taken with. We became friends. We hang out on breaks, company functions. I consider her a good friend. Okay? And although I wouldn't call it a crush, I admit that I am quite smitten, and she's very charming and she's fun to be around. And I admit that if I were not married, I'd be interested in dating this woman. However, I'm happy with my marriage and have no desire to leave my wife for someone else. And I've read some of your past letters, and you've always said that these types of feelings are okay as long as you don't act on them. Well, don't worry, I haven't. But the problem is that my wife found out about my feelings, and she's having a hard time dealing with it. And I wasn't going to tell her, but I let it slip that I was jealous of all the time that she was spending with one of my coworkers. Well, my wife can't understand how I could have a crush on someone else if I claim to be in love with her. And I know it must be especially hard for her because I cheated on her before we were married, so it makes it difficult for her to trust me. So in conclusion, I suppose I have 3 questions. First, is there anything wrong with being married but having a crush on someone else? He said some people call this emotional infidelity, but I disagree since I haven't fallen out of love with my wife, and I'm not neglecting her for someone else. And if you agree with me, how do I convince my wife that this is perfectly natural and it doesn't mean that I love her any less? And third, isn't it reasonable after 3 years of marriage that my wife would still be mistrustful of me for something that happened before we got married? And must I resign myself to the fact that she'll never be able to completely trust me again? Signed, Smitten. Okay, look. So you're asking me if there's anything wrong with the crush. And it's like that's a very different question. That's like you're asking if there's anything wrong with having gas. And a person is incapable of controlling feelings of attraction as he is in controlling a gas attack, a hunger pain, a sexual urge. But you said in your letter, you can choose to control your behavior and not act on your urges. You said you have no intention of acting on your attraction, but there is action going on here. You're taking active steps to see this woman. I'm thinking about like a priest who has taken a vow of chastity. The priest who honors his vows avoids situations that tempt him too much. And he would avoid a candlelight dinner with a woman that he's attracted to. You took a marriage vow, so I have to wonder why you're continuing to see someone who is so tempting for you. Aren't your feelings going to deepen with contact? You're playing with fire. The proximity breeds greater attraction. So why are you playing with fire? You are acting on impulse, doing what feels good in the moment, and to the heck with the long-term consequences. And yeah, it may feel good to see this woman, but what are the long-term risks to your marriage? And were you also acting on another set of feelings when you laid the revelation on your wife? I mean, it sounds like could you have been angry with your wife, and did you reveal that information in order to release some of your aggression? Because your wife is feeling tortured by the news. And did you expect her to feel glad? And you need to examine your unconscious motives, figure out what you expect to accomplish by the revelation and by seeing this girl. And I think you're angrier with your wife than you realize. And of course, that's normal in marriage, but when that anger goes underground, it gets translated into relationship destructive actions. Then you've got problems. And seeing this woman and dropping the news that you're smitten in it and are smitten is an angry relationship destructive act. So work on owning your feelings and communicating them more directly. And I want you to look at your tendency to act on impulse and gratify yourself at your wife's expense. And when you're facing these issues head on and talking rather than acting on your feelings, your wife is going to feel more able to trust you. And I think I heard somewhere in your question something about she had some kind of thing with a coworker. So I'm wondering here if you are paying her back. There's a lot more going on with this question than meets the eye. And yeah, it'll feel good to see this woman, but you are playing with fire and you're beating on your wife in the process. All right. So that's all I have for you this week on Ask Dr. Love Radio. That was quite a show I had last week. You know, when I talked with that author about the repetition compulsion and the theories that he formed out of his own abuse, I was really speaking to you to help you understand how when old scars go underground and don't get healed, you keep choosing partners over and over again who abuse you. And in his case, he kept picking women who were never satisfied with him and using him, which then, instead of realizing it was his problem, he made a theory about all women. So I hope that was clear to you all. So, see you next week on Ask Dr. Love Radio, and mind your mouth, or your relationships will go south.